What's a common mistake you see, especially young contractors making, especially when it comes to a dispute, whether it's a residential or a commercial, is that they don't get everything in writing and they don't have a papered file, and it's hard to see what was agreed to or not?
Generally, I mean, documentation on a project, regardless of the size, is always important. And I've spoken on the topic before, but you know, the party that has the best documentation about what was discussed and what happened on the project generally wins if it's going to get to the point of having to go to trial, just because you've got contemporaneous documents that are telling the story. It's not a situation where you're saying, yeah, 3 years ago he told me XYZ. You've got something in writing that said, okay, we had this conversation today and you told me XYZ. It's it helps your project. I also think that sometimes young contractors, they're afraid to tell the client no. And they're afraid to tell the client what it's going to cost. If, for example, with change orders, I've seen several, and I generally try and avoid handling residential work just because it's almost like a divorce. The people, it's their house. It's very important to them. So I generally like to handle more commercial projects, but had seen many situations where a contractor, the wife will say, I'd like to change this and I'd like to change this. And the contractor does what the wife wants, and the husband, who's having to pay the bills, potentially, it could be the other way around. But, he finds out, wait a minute, it's going to cost, my project just went up $50,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem.
You've probably had those conversations.
Most definitely. That's why it's important on a contract and a change order to have all property owners sign everything, right?
Sure.
Not only does it solve the wife said yes and the husband didn't know, it solves that, but in court, having both property owners, whoever's on the deed,
right,
on the contract and change orders is crucial, right?
Well, especially with respect to the contract itself. In Texas, if you want to be able to file a mechanics lien on a project that is someone's homestead, the contract has to be signed by both the husband and the wife, and you have to file the contract with the county before you start the work. Otherwise, you don't have any lien rights.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've had situations where a client says, I want to file a lien. I'm like, it's their homestead, this lien will be invalid,
right.
And so it's always good to get things in writing, but you have to play that balance of being a salesman and almost a counselor on getting a project done, and wanting your client to be happy, and covering your backside.
Yeah,
with
for
paperwork.
Sure. Absolutely. Talk about the importance of. Well, you already said getting everything in writing. Sometimes it's not possible. It's in the heat of the day, whatever. We need this decision made now, and instead of an email and maybe a DocuSign, we've got an agreement on text message. If you got that in writing, that's still approval in writing, is it not? Is it just not carry as much weight as an emailed document?
Well,
would?
part of the problem is people don't keep texts. A lot of times texts get deleted. I think a jury would look at a text as as an agreement. Although the good thing about being an attorney is I can argue both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want the answer to be?
Right.
I can argue points on both sides, and there'd be colorable arguments on that. But I think whatever you have to do, whether it's texts, if you can't get an email, send a text. This is to confirm you've approved XYZ. And if they don't respond to that saying, no, we didn't agree to that, I think it's going to be relatively solid.
Yeah.
So.
The thorough approach is something that, and a lot of young contractors watch this podcast because I've had contractors, insurance, claim specialists, public adjusters all on, and wanted to have you on, well, because we've known each other for a long time and we've got deep rugby roots, but also just to discuss how important it is to be thorough. Even when you're behind, you're wearing all these hats as a contractor. I mean, it's hard to be. Entrepreneurship in the contracting side of things is very challenging. But if you do go the extra mile and you do paper the file and you do keep track of everything and get text approval at the very least, you're really doing yourself a favor. So it's best to just buckle down and do it, right? Yeah. That's what the young contractors watching this need to know.
Well, exactly. And one thing you just raised is real important. You know, you talked a little bit about getting paid for the work you do, but one thing that comes up a lot, especially in doing residential, are the delays, where and especially right now, where getting materials. You know, I'm trying to get some windows replaced at my house, and they're telling me, you know, if you pay for them now, they may be in 10, 12 weeks. You know, so but if you commit to something up front, and in terms of a time you're going to finish, and something changes, is getting out front of that with the homeowner to let them know, okay, this change or this problem is going to delay the project. We're not going to be able to get it done by the end of July. It's going to be pushed back at least until the end of August, because it looks like we're going to have a 4-week delay in getting this material in. And maybe there's a way to resolve it up front, in terms of maybe a change of material into something else where it doesn't take as much time. But it's communication with the homeowner, and then following up with something in writing that tells the homeowner, you know, hey, this is what's happening, and you know, this is the way we think we can best solve this and minimize the delay.
I think the thorough approach just takes time, and when you're young, you're just concentrating on selling everything you can get your hands on, because you're always thinking, well, if I make a mistake here but I sell more jobs, I'll be able to always. Is it common to you that young contractors come to you and they're like, hey, I'm in this jam. Can you give me your advice? And you're like, hey, you're really kind of screwed here, but then you help them, but buff up their contract and reinforce their position so they're in a better position moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly something, you know, we have the ability to do. I think a lot of guys, their margin is just, you know, so slim. They're not wanting to get a full blown contract. You know, if you look at an AIA document, in fact, I'm going to be spending tomorrow revising an architectural agreement that's, you know, 60 pages long, single spaced. It's mind numbing, but but there are things you can do in short form contracts that are going to cover, you know, some of the issues that you need to deal with. But again, it's communication with the client and understand, and that's no different from, you know, the practice of law, you know. And you've got to communicate with your client. You got to listen. You got to ask them the right questions, and you got to be honest with them. You know, one of the things clients come to me with all the time is, well, how much is this lawsuit going to cost? And that's impossible to guess, because you've got so many different factors that weigh into it. You know, how unreasonable is the other side? How unreasonable is the other attorney? How many depositions you want to take? So, you know, but with any client, it's communication.